Ukrainian military has reported progress in their counteroffensive in the south, advancing by 8.6 kilometers and liberating over 10 square kilometers of territory. In the Melitopol and Berdyansk areas, they have regained a total surface area of 169 square kilometers. However, the conflict continues with Russian forces carrying out 36 airstrikes on 10 civilian settlements in the Zaporizhia region in the past 24 hours, as reported by the regional governor, Yuri Malashko. Additionally, the southern city of Mykolaiv was hit by a ballistic missile strike by Russian troops on July 10th, resulting in injuries and damage to civilian infrastructure. Meanwhile, on the political front, as the Vilnius summit approaches, NATO remains divided over how to proceed with Ukraine's request for membership. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has proposed a package that includes bypassing the requirement for a Membership Action Plan, MAP, a set of political, economic, and military goals typically required for other Eastern European nations before joining the alliance. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky reiterated his call for a clear signal on Ukraine's NATO membership prospects on July 10th. He asserted Ukraine's readiness and alignment with NATO values, stating that the security reality of NATO's eastern flank depends on Ukraine. Stoltenberg, while acknowledging the importance of unity and a strong message on Ukraine, has indicated that no final decision has been made yet, and there will be more meetings to discuss the matter. According to the first independent statistical analysis of Russia's war dead conducted by independent Russian media outlets, Mediazona and Meduza, in collaboration with a data scientist from Germany's Tübingen University, almost 50,000 Russian men have reportedly died in the war in Ukraine. The teams used a statistical concept called excess mortality to estimate this number, as Moscow and Kyiv do not provide timely data on military losses, and each side tends to inflate the other's casualties. The analysts examined inheritance records and official mortality data to determine the number of men under 50 who died between February 2022 and May 2023, in excess of what would be normally expected. The investigation's editor, Dmitry Treshanin, emphasized that these figures only include soldiers whose names are known and whose deaths were verified by multiple sources, thereby revealing the hidden deaths that the Russian government is allegedly trying to conceal. This estimate is roughly in line with a May assessment by the White House that stated more than 20,000 Russians had been killed in Ukraine since December, though it's lower than US and UK intelligence assessments of overall Russian deaths. With an average of around 400 casualties a day for 17 months, Russia is facing a crisis in combat medical care that is likely negatively impacting civilian medical services in regions near Ukraine. However, it's important to note that this analysis doesn't include Russians who are missing, but not officially recognized as dead, or Ukrainian citizens fighting in units of the self-proclaimed Donetsk and Luhansk republics. Additionally, the COVID-19 pandemic has complicated the task of determining the number of men who would have died in Russia since February 2022 if there had not been a war. Ukrainian defense forces have been making progress in the Tavria sector, reportedly inflicting heavy casualties on Russian troops. Over the past day, more than 2 companies of Russian troops have been killed or wounded, according to General Oleksandr Tarnovsky, the commander of the Tavria operational grouping of troops. In his statement on Telegram, General Tarnovsky declared that the movement of the defense forces in the Tavria direction is continuing and the enemy is being eliminated. In addition to inflicting personnel losses, Ukrainian defenders also managed to destroy 17 pieces of Russian military equipment and 9 ammunition depots. This news signals a significant development in Ukraine's ongoing efforts to repel the Russian invasion and regain control over its territory. The conflict between Ukraine and Russia continues with significant battles in the Kupiansk, Lyman, Bakhmut, Avdiivka, and Marinka directions. Over the past day, 17 combat engagements have been reported in these areas. According to the General Staff of Ukraine, the threat of Russian missile and airstrikes remains across the country. In the Siversky and Slobozhansky directions, Russian troops have launched airstrikes near Basov, Odnorobivka, and Veterinarna in the Kharkiv region, and they have also attacked about 10 settlements with artillery and mortars. In the Kupiansk direction, Ukrainian forces continue to hold their position steadfastly. they have also successfully repelled Russian attacks near Hryarivka in the Bakhmut direction, despite intense air and artillery strikes. In the Avdiivka direction, Ukrainian defense forces continue to resist Russian onslaught near Syeverna in the Donetsk region. They also successfully repelled all Russian attacks near Marinka and Krasnohorivka in the Donetsk region. In the Shakhtarsk direction, Russian troops' offensive actions near Novomikhailivka in the Donetsk region have been unsuccessful. Over the past 24 hours, Ukraine's Air Force has launched 4 strikes on enemy personnel, ammunition, and military equipment clusters, indicating ongoing proactive measures to neutralize the threat posed by the invading Russian forces. Yevgeny Prigozhin, a Russian oligarch, with close ties to President Vladimir Putin and known for his association with the Wagner Group, a private military company involved in various conflicts around the world, reportedly visited Moscow and met with Putin on July 1st, according to Western intelligence sources. In addition to his meeting with Putin, Prigozhin is also reported to have met with General Viktor Zolotov, commander of the Russian National Guard and known to be one of Putin's most loyal followers, and Sergei Naryshkin, chief of Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service. Given Prigozhin's alleged involvement in various covert military and political operations around the world through the Wagner Group, these high-level meetings could suggest strategic discussions or planning related to Russia's current or future operations. However, without further specifics, it's difficult to draw conclusions about the exact nature or implications of these reported meetings. The reported stance of Washington and Berlin, as depicted by the Financial Times, suggests a more cautious approach to Ukraine's prospective NATO membership. Both countries, key NATO members, apparently prefer a summit statement that does not fully endorse Ukraine's path to NATO membership, and certainly does not extend an invitation for Ukraine to join the alliance after the war concludes, a position contrary to the expectations of some Eastern European nations. The opposition to Ukraine's immediate accession to NATO, as the Financial Times indicates, revolves around the insistence that Ukraine meet strict standards regarding governance, military standards, and weaponry before joining the alliance. Another factor seems to be the uncertainty about the conclusion of the current conflict. Without a clear understanding of how and when the war will end, some NATO members may be hesitant to make commitments regarding Ukraine's potential membership. This cautious stance can also be seen as a reflection of the geopolitical complexity surrounding Ukraine's potential membership in NATO. While the alliance is based on collective defense and democratic principles, its expansion towards Russia's borders has been a point of contention with Moscow. Balancing the desire to support Ukraine while avoiding further escalation with Russia poses a significant diplomatic challenge. The reported impasse during the NATO ambassadors' meeting on July 9th suggests that the final decision regarding the language of the summit statement will likely be made by the leaders of the NATO countries during the summit scheduled for July 12th. This report by Bloomberg suggests a new development in Russia's foreign policy strategy. According to the article, Moscow has given permission to the Wagner Group, a private military company with alleged ties to the Kremlin, to maintain its substantial operations in the Central African Republic, CAR. This decision, allegedly endorsed by Russian President Vladimir Putin, indicates that Russia is allowing private contractors to continue operating in certain regions, even as it intervenes in other areas more directly. The Bloomberg article suggests a couple of reasons for this strategy. First, the Russian Defense Ministry may find it difficult to immediately fill the complex role that the Wagner Group plays in places like CAR. This means that private contractors might still be needed to further Moscow's interests in places like Sudan and other countries. Second, the article suggests that Putin might permit groups like the Wagner Group to handle operations that can sustain themselves, while the Kremlin will aim to control operations in countries where Russian mercenaries rely on funding from Moscow. However, this strategy may face challenges. For example, Bloomberg reports that the Wagner Group has been supporting rebels against the government army in Sudan, even as Moscow maintains close relations with Sudan's military leadership. This could cause a rift between the Kremlin and the private military company. Moreover, according to a source from a Russian state-owned company, one of the Wagner Group's key selling points to African leaders has been its access to Putin. If Moscow takes a more direct role in managing operations, the private military company might become less valuable to African countries. This could have implications for Russia's influence in the region. The reported evacuation preparations in Sumy Oblast, Ukraine, seem to stem from escalating violence and instability in the region. The Sumy Regional Military Administration has reportedly cited frequent cross-border artillery attacks from Russian forces and the activities of Russian saboteur groups as the primary reasons for these preparations. According to the administration, Russian artillery attacks on border communities have been on the rise recently. Between January and July, these attacks have reportedly resulted in the death of 35 civilians, with 17 deaths, including one child, occurring in the past month alone. The attacks are not only causing loss of life, but also damaging essential infrastructure and causing problems with energy supplies. Repair efforts are apparently being thwarted as repair crews are deliberately targeted by Russian forces. Additionally, the presence and activity of Russian saboteur groups pose a significant threat to local residents. These groups have allegedly carried out murders in local communities, such as the foresters in Svesa Hromada and locals in Shakihin Hromada. These disturbing developments illustrate the grave impact of the conflict on civilian populations, underscoring the urgent need for a resolution to the hostilities and for adequate protection and support for those caught in the crossfire. The meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and the founder of the Wagner Group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, indicates a high-level interaction between the Russian state and the controversial private military company, PMC. The meeting reportedly happened in the Kremlin on June 29th and lasted almost 3 hours, as per Dmitry Peskov, Putin's spokesperson. The details of the meeting are undisclosed, but it is suggested that Putin assessed the company's actions in the ongoing conflict and the events of June 24th, presumably referring to some form of insurrection or dispute within the Wagner Group. The commanders of the group are said to have provided their version of the events and reassured Putin of their loyalty. Putin, in turn, reportedly offered the Wagner leaders further options for employment and combat deployment. This high-profile meeting and subsequent arrangements suggest that the Russian government continues to find value in the use of PMCs, such as the Wagner Group, despite reported internal conflicts and controversies. It is worth noting that the use of PMCs in conflicts can raise serious legal and ethical issues, given their potential to operate outside of traditional military command structures and legal frameworks. As such, this development could further complicate the ongoing conflict and international response. The meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and the founder of the Wagner Group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, indicates a high-level interaction between the Russian state and the controversial private military company, PMC. The meeting reportedly happened in the Kremlin on June 29th and lasted almost 3 hours, as per Dmitry Peskov, Putin's spokesperson. The details of the meeting are undisclosed, but it is suggested that Putin assessed the company's actions in the ongoing conflict and the events of June 24th, presumably referring to some form of insurrection or dispute within the Wagner Group. The commanders of the group are said to have provided their version of the events and reassured Putin of their loyalty. Putin, in turn, reportedly offered the Wagner leaders further options for employment and combat deployment. This high-profile meeting and subsequent arrangements suggest that the Russian government continues to find value in the use of PMCs, such as the Wagner Group, despite reported internal conflicts and controversies. It is worth noting that the use of PMCs in conflicts can raise serious legal and ethical issues, given their potential to operate outside of traditional military command structures and legal frameworks. As such, this development could further complicate the ongoing conflict and international response.